Hello, it is the 2024 Surface season, and welcome to one of the weirdest launches of a Surface Pro device ever. And this here is the Surface Pro 10 for business. That means it has the Intel chip rather than the presumable Surface Pro 10 for consumers that will have the Snapdragon X Elite that's coming up in the future. But that device doesn't exist yet in a form that we can test. It's not released. This one is, so we're going to take a look at it, let you know what the performance looks like, how it compares to the Surface Pro 9, and just thoughts in general on the device. So this will be our Surface Pro 10 for business first look. And first I want to cover some of the notable differences that we have on the new Surface Pro 10. And that includes glare reduction. We now have rounded screen edges. The screen's brighter, moving from 450 nits to 600 nits. There's an improved front camera from 1080p to 1440p. There's 2 extra cores. You were also moving 2 generations from 12th gen on the Surface Pro 9 to 14th gen / 1st gen of the Intel series. And we also get an NFC chip this time. There's also an NPU involved. It's part of the Intel CPU GPU stack. There's also now that NPU. We also have access to 64 gigabytes of RAM. Also, the RAM speed rate has increased to 7,500 megatransfers per second, which is actually a pretty big deal as it improves things quite a bit. Okay, so let's look at our generational improvement year over year over the entire Surface Pro history. Now, this goes back I don't know, 10 plus years almost. And you can see the original Surface Pro on Cinebench R11 single core was at 0.9, and now we're all the way up to 3.13, which is only marginal from the Surface Pro 9. But let's take a look at the multi-core. So we can see those 2 extra cores do give us a little bit of a bump here. Massive improvements the last 2 generations in multi-core performance. We're up at 21.62 on that Cinebench R11.5 multi. And again, these benchmarks are old benchmarks because they're benchmarks that had to have existed way back when, so I can do the comparison. We'll get to more current benchmark figures as we go through this review. So let's look at generational 3D performance. And you can see that while the Surface Pro 9 actually regressed from the Surface Pro 8, we got another bump here, which is actually very interesting because the graphics in this Surface Pro 10 on the 165U processor is actually 64 execution units, moving down from the 96 that we had in the Surface Pro 9. But the clock speed has gone up quite a bit, and the whole stack is completely reconfigured for this year. So what that nets us is some pretty good improvement in graphical performance on the Surface Pro 10. So let's move forward. Here are a couple of the most common benchmarks I use. Final Fantasy 15 benchmark. We actually see a 45% increase in performance going from Surface Pro 9 to Surface Pro 10. So that's actually a huge increase, which I was not expecting. I was thinking, man, they nerfed the execution units and it's going to be, on par. But it actually, with the additional clock speed they've given this thing, we're actually seeing a pretty big increase here. So 45% there. Time Spy was a 30% increase. We get 2364. And Firestrike, not a big of an increase on this one, but it was about an 8% increase, going to 5252 from 4873. So Surface Pro 10 definitely is a pretty good bump in 3D performance. Let's keep it rolling. Does it throttle? This is what, classic C-Butters benchmark, right? So how does it perform when you really peg that processor with a full multi-core load? What does it do? Well, it starts off at 44 watts, and then it drops down over the next, and within a minute, you're down to 30 watts. So then for the next 5 minutes, you go along at about 30 watts. And then after 5 minutes is up, it dropped down to 25 and kind of hung out there until it got too hot. The back of the device starts warming up. The CPU itself was actually not overheating necessarily at 30 or especially 25 watts. But because the back gets hot, Surface says we're going to throttle things. And so as things heat up over time, you actually drift down to about 22, 23 watts, which is actually very good. This is without a fan. This is without a fan on Surface Pro 10, and it's maintaining about 22 watts, which is really quite good. So, of course, you guys know, I sell these fans that go on the back of your Surface Pro device, and it just snaps on, and it can keep things cool. So, what effect did my fan have? Turned on the fan at 21 minutes, and you can see, brought us back up to that 30 watt sustained power consumption. So yeah, the fan definitely does its job, immediately starts to boost things, letting you maintain 30 watts of performance versus 22. So that's a pretty big jump, 7 or 8 watts that you're getting from these fans. So you can purchase those on my store, link in the description. But anyways, just thought I'd throw that out there as I do that every year. The only difference is I now have my own fan to sell. So disclaimer, but I make those myself. They're 3D printed. I make them in my house. You order them, I go build it. So there you go. Okay, so let's talk Surface Pro 10 business. Do you want the i5 version or the i7 version? Well, this year is actually a really good year for the i5, I would say. And here's why. If you look at the specs between the i5 and the i7, it has the exact same numbers of cores, has exact same cache as well. A lot of times you would used to see you'd have less cache on the i5. There's a clock speed difference. The performance cores go from 4.4 on the i5 to 4.9 on the i7. But the thing is a lot of the times you're going to be throttled a little bit. So if you're, at that 25 to 30 watts sustained power, you're going to be throttled a little bit anyway, so that may not be that big of a difference. So again, I don't have the i5 version. I tested the i7 version in this review, but just so you know, the CPU itself is not much different at all. And the same thing goes with the GPU. That was normally a big difference as well. The i7 had 96 execution units and the i5 had 64. So in the Surface Pro 10, they both have the exact same number of execution units. They're both at 64. There's only a 100 megahertz, which is less than 5% difference on that GPU. So I think for most people, the i5 is going to be the one to get. But of course, if you need higher amounts of RAM, 32 gigs of RAM, you're going to be locked into that i7 anyways. So they've kind of made it difficult on the pricing this year as well. Again, there's probably no one watching this review because they just have not provided the best value on this, but it's still fun to look at. Okay, so battery life. I hate talking about battery life, and it's because there's no accurate way to tell someone what their battery life is going to be. You can give ranges, and that's what I tend to do on my battery life when I talk about battery life. So we've got a 47 watt hour battery in the Surface Pro 10. As I was using the device, I saw usage as low as 4 watts when idling or just browsing a static page or a static document. And then when gaming or doing something very intensive, multi-core, I've seen usage as high as 39 watts. And I have seen up to 60 watts, but it's not for a long period of time, and then it drifts back down. So it usually kind of evens out at 39 watts if you're really pushing the device, and that's why I'm saying 39 watts. They've really tuned it to this 39 watt level because that's obviously what the adapter they include in the box is. So 39 watts is kind of like your max that you'll see on it. If you take those 4 watt and 39 watt values, do the math, you've got a 47 watt hour battery, divide it by 4, you're going to get 11.75 hours, about 12 hours maximum. That's kind of idling, piddling around, writing a document. And the shortest possible life that you might have if you're like literally slamming this device with compute loads, the math says if you take that 47 watt hour battery, divide it by 39 watts, you're going to be 1.2 hours. So that's your battery life, 1.2 hours to 12 hours. That's what I'll tell you. It depends what you're doing. It depends what your use case is. Okay, so what's good about the Surface Pro 10? Well, the graphics are actually an improvement. That was the biggest revelation to me on this one, because I really wasn't expecting graphics to be better than the Surface Pro 9, and they are. In some benchmarks, it's a 45% improvement, although that's uncommon. I would say on average, it's probably about a 20 to 25% improvement overall. And that 7,500 megatransfer per second RAM really seems to make things pretty snappy. And I think that's some of where the graphical performance is coming in, is not only that, but the new process node on the GPU is really good. The other good thing about it is they did a really good job. I think it's the same as the Surface Pro 9, but they may have like tweaked things slightly. It's kind of just refined. But with the fan, you can maintain 30 watts sustained load, and that pretty much keeps it really keeps it in pretty high. Like the performance cores are maxed out even at 30 watts, and then everything else is kind of at 3.4 to 3.5. So you're getting really good clock speeds at 30 watts. Previous Surface devices, you could maintain maybe 22 to 25 with a fan. And now this thing's, can do 30 watts with a fan, or if you're not using a fan, 22 to 25, which is still pretty good. I mean, and the fan noise is very quiet on this one. It's hard to compare between generations. Like I don't have a Surface Pro 9 on hand right now. I just have the Surface Pro 10, but I would say the fan noise is very minimal. And so yeah, the screen is brighter, and that makes a huge difference. The colors, it pops way more. The screen is excellent, and I don't have any of the smearing issues that I've seen on the Surface Laptop Studio 2. The response time seems to be I don't know if it's as good as the Surface Pro 9, but it looks to be. I can't tell a difference with my eyes, but I'm not seeing the smearing or the ghosting that I saw on some other panels on other Surface devices. So screen is really good on this machine. I like it a lot. And the audio, I've been using some Asus ROG laptops and some ZenBooks, and their audio is pretty good. But man, I turn on that Surface Pro audio, it's just so clear and sounds really good. I really like the refined audio on this Surface Pro 10. And the eGPU, I didn't include any eGPU benchmarks, but I'll just give you a quick. Performance is about the same when you run benchmarks, but the stuttering, and I think this really comes down to the fact that things are a little more efficient, and you've got that 7,500 megatransfer per second RAM, and where you used to kind of get like little stutters in games on eGPU, I've noticed it just seems very, very smooth. So I'm really happy with the eGPU performance. I wouldn't say that its peak performance is any higher, because that depends on your GPU. But the amount of stuttering is much reduced on Surface Pro 10 versus Surface Pro 9, enough so that it's good enough that it has me debating using my GPD G1 as the graphics solution along with the Surface Pro 10. And I did a video about using this eGPU with the Surface Pro 9, and I kind of showed how it was really cool, but it wasn't ideal. A lot of those stuttering issues that I had with this eGPU on the Surface Pro 9 are not here on the Surface Pro 10, because just that much more of a bottleneck has been removed. So yeah, I don't know what to attribute that to. Maybe the Thunderbolt controller is a little bit better in the Surface Pro 10. I really don't know, but performance and specifically the smoothness that I'm getting on eGPUs with the Surface Pro 10 is really good. And that's probably not something you're going to be able to do on the Snapdragon X Elite, just saying. Surface Pro 10 Business, what is bad? Well, I'll tell you what's awful. They include a 39 watt charger in the box, which is ridiculous. Yes, you can get away with the 39 watt charger. Like, you're not going to run out of battery if you have it plugged in. But if you're doing something intensive, it's literally not going to charge. If you were running a game, if you were running, crunching some video editing, you could have that thing plugged in and it would literally not charge for you with that 39 watt adapter, because you're literally using about 39 watts when it's maxed out and sustained load. So I have seen it pull from my USB-C power meter. I've seen it pull up to about 60 watts. So you want if you want to be able to charge at the maximum speed while also doing what you need to do on the device, you need a 60 watt plus charger. So I would say 65 watt is what you want. Microsoft cheaped out and didn't give us the 65 watt adapter this time. It's fine. It's probably going to be the same adapter that they use on the consumer version with the Snapdragon, and it works. But you would definitely want at least a 45 watt USB-C charger, or get yourself a 65 watt Surface adapter. You can still pick them up online for cheaper. Or if you have USB-C chargers like I do, like, just use that, because you're going to be better off. Anyways, the other thing that's bad about it is the price. This is the most expensive version of Surface Pro that's been released. Yes, it starts at $1,200, but that's 8 gigabytes of RAM. You really don't want that. You want 16. Well, let's look at it. The minimum starting price with 16 gigs of RAM, which I would say you need minimum, is $14.99, which means in order to get into anything worthwhile, you're looking at $14.99. And I think that if you really like Surface Pro, I think, and you don't need 32 gigs of RAM, I would start here. But you may want to step up to the 32 gigs of RAM here, which bumps you all the way up to $17.99, which frankly is, compared to some other options out there, is not worth it. So you may want to look for fire sales or some discounts on this as it comes through later on. If you want to step into the i7, my recommendation, if you really want the i7 and 32 gigs of RAM, because you need 32 gigs of RAM, I would go with this and then upgrade the SSD yourself. They don't even, on this i5, they're not even giving you a 1 terabyte option. Like, come on. Like, if you, like, I was impressed because it was only a $100 jump, but then I realized it's only 256 gigabytes of RAM extra. It's like, come on, guys. And on the i7, like, if you want to step up from a 32 gigs of RAM and then wanted to get a 1 terabyte instead of a 256, you're paying $400 for a 1 terabyte SSD. Like, that's ridiculous. And so, yes, they're price gouging. We know they are. That it just is what it is. That's what they do. They're running a business. It is what it is. But it's unfortunate because the Surface Pro at times has been kind of like a premium yet budget option for people. And I think with this, they're really just pricing out most consumers out of this thing. So I'm not sure what they're going to do on the consumer version, whether that's going to be the Snapdragon Pro only. They'll throw some Intel options in there eventually. It would be nice if they did that and brought them in at a kind of a cheaper price range, because that i5 is pretty competitive. If you need things like full x86 compatibility, you want to use an eGPU, maybe you play games that have anti-cheat that's not going to work on the Snapdragon, or there's a whole host of reasons why you still might want an x86 device. And everyone wants to attack me because I like to point those things out. But I think most consumers, when that thing rolls out, they're not going to know all the things that may not work for them. So anyways, I will review the Surface Pro 10 for consumers when it comes out. And yeah, I did a whole video on this, and I think a lot of people will be super happy with that Snapdragon X Elite. I am not trying to crap on it. All I'm saying is there's still reasons why you might want the Intel version of it. And so I hope they bring that to consumers at a cheaper price range at some point. Okay, so to sum this up, the Surface Pro 10 for Business is the ultimate Surface Pro device, the best one that has ever existed. Increases in performance, slight increases on CPU, pretty big increases on GPU. You get the NPU, you get brighter screen, you get an anti-glare coating, and it is a very compelling device, albeit very expensive. But if you know what you like about it, if you like the feel of the Surface Pro, the usage case of Surface Pro, I still love this form factor, 10 years later. So anyways, it is the best Surface Pro ever made so far. And it should be, right? When the consumer version of the Surface Pro 10 comes out with the Snapdragon X Elite on ARM comes out, I'll be excited to review that one as well. But for now, this is what you can expect from the Surface Pro 10 for business. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on future videos.